Get out the insurance cards, get out the co-pays. The office is open, my friends. Brought to you by drroto.com.
What is up, and welcome into another off-season edition. We are the One and Done Show. We are your fast break of college basketball information. I am Eric Romoff. You can catch me on those Twitter streets at FantasyNav, and he is the captain of our ship, the arbiter of our big board, none other than Mr. Mike Holland. Mike, how's it going tonight?
It's going good, man. I'm excited to finally have the entire transfer portal set. We're just kind of waiting on some news here from the NBA draft, see what players kind of keep their names in. Obviously go to drroto.com. You can see our top 100 there. A lot of decisions being made. Just excited to see where we kind of go from here as teams kind of take shape. With that, we have the columnist for the Omaha World Herald joining us today. Dirk Chatelain, appreciate you coming by to chat with us a little bit about some Creighton hoops.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It's an exciting time of year.
It certainly is, and especially for this Creighton program, right? We start with the huge news last Tuesday, the top ranked transfer. I think he was number 2 on Mike's big board. Baylor Shireman made his decision for the Creighton Bluejays. I guess Dirk, maybe kind of walk us through this process a little bit. What were your thoughts when the news dropped? How did this unfold? How did he come about to his decision to join Creighton?
Well, Baylor Shireman has, I think, been on the transfer portal, radar for about 2 years now, since he sort of emerged as a really jack of all trades, sort of versatile 1 through 4 almost at South Dakota State. They won 30 games this year. They went undefeated in the Summit League, and I think the question was just going to be: is he going to be willing to make the jump, to put his name out there and see what happens? And I think he's considering the NBA still. I think that's an option that if he gets positive feedback, I think he would still be interested in going that route. But more likely is that he's going to go to Creighton. And I think the big reason, one, it's home. It's about 2 hours from his hometown in Aurora, Nebraska. But even more than that, I think it's Creighton's. It's their style of play and sort of what they have coming back. I mean, it's just a tailor-made situation for Baylor Shireman. He can give them lots of different things. He can be the knockdown shooter that they need. He can be, play some point guard. He can be a clutch scorer. He can even be a rebounder for them, play small ball 4. So it's a really exciting development for Creighton, and I think it's exciting for Baylor too, because as you guys know from watching him, he's really kind of a showman, and I think he deserves the big stage. And I think Creighton in the Big East is going to give him that big stage.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. I mean, he's a lot of fun to watch. I think for a lot of people, really the only exposure they got to his game, just for the casual fan, was in the Big Dance when he put on the show against a tough Providence team. You followed his career from the high school ranks. Can you tell us what kind of player the Blue Jays are getting?
Well, it's funny. I first watched him when he was about 14, 15 years old, and he's playing. He's about 6'2", 6'3", playing as a freshman, sophomore in high school. He's probably about 150 pounds at that state, and he's throwing no-look passes. He's shooting from like 25 feet, and he was playing with some really good players. Like one of his teammates, Austin Allen, was a Nebraska football tight end who may end up in the NFL. Another kid went to play Division II college and was an upperclassman on that team. So he was playing with some really good players, but you could tell he just loved the limelight. He loved the moment. And as he got older, that never really changed. He set passing records as a Nebraska high school quarterback. I think he threw 58 touchdown passes his senior year. He very, very easily could have been a high major Division I quarterback, but basketball was his love, and it was a little bit surprising. He committed very early, at fall of his junior year. He went to South Dakota State. He wasn't getting a lot of recruiting buzz at that age, but I think after a couple of years at SDSU, the high majors were, any high major coach looking for sort of an efficient glue guy who could also, be a big time scorer if you asked him to. I think Baylor was on their radar. And what's exciting about it from a coaching standpoint, I think, and Mike, you'd be able to speak to this too. He can kind of fill any role that you want him to fill. And I think he's really going to thrive in that regard at Creighton because, it's a very versatile team. They got Trey Alexander and Arthur Kaluma and Nemhard, the point guard who was all Big East freshman of the year, and Ryan Kalkbrenner, the 7-footer in the middle. They've got a lot of talent, but they really need kind of a savvy, confident veteran, and Baylor Shireman should fit that perfectly.
Yeah, he really should, and he should fit into the larger, broader mold for this team, right? There's a lot of versatility in this roster. There's a lot of depth in this roster. It's certainly one that Mike and I enjoyed covering throughout the season last year, certainly some of our favorite DFS plays. And, now these Jays find themselves in a position that might be a little unfamiliar, right? There's some conversation about maybe even starting the preseason as high as a top 5 ranking. So how do you think Coach McDermott manages these increased expectations, and what's the general vibe or sense around the program for this coming season?
Well, that's going to be a very interesting dynamic because Creighton, last year they were picked 8th in the Big East to start the season, and they made the NCAA tournament and made the second round and almost beat Kansas in the second round. But they have struggled over the years at times when they felt the crush of high expectations, and there's been lots of different reasons for that. Most of them were injury related. They've often had injuries at the wrong times. Until they made the Sweet 16 about 14 months ago. That was really a hurdle that they'd failed to overcome, even with Doug McDermott. So Creighton, high expectations have been a challenge to them, probably like they are in programs across the country that aren't the big time, blue bloods. But I think, this group is just extremely talented. I think there's multiple NBA guys on this roster. And I think Creighton did, learn something not only in this past season, getting to the second round of the NCAA tournament, but also kind of how they did it. And you guys, I'm sure, have noticed this over the years. But Creighton in the last 2 or 3 years has transitioned from sort of a soft finesse, let it fly was their mantra. And they still like that identity. It's still partly what appealed to Baylor Shireman. But they've also developed a grit and a toughness that you see with Alexander and Kaluma and Kalkbrenner that has made them, I think, given them more potential in the postseason. It has allowed them to make deeper runs in the Big East. This is a team that is not afraid to defend in the last 5 minutes of a game, and that wasn't always the case with Doug McDermott and some of those teams over the last decade.
Yeah, so you kind of mentioned this roster, right? It's pretty exciting being a college basketball fan, watching what that freshman class did last year. You mentioned Kalkbrenner being the defensive stalwart in a growing offensive game. So, for me, between, Trey Alexander, Arthur Kaluma, Ryan Nimhart, Kalkbrenner, is there an X factor on this team where we look back and say, like, this was the development that Creighton needed in order to kind of exceed or, match expectations?
Well, okay, so as you guys know, they played Kansas in the second round of the NCAA tournament without Nemhard and without Kalkbrenner, both of whom were injured. And there were times during that Kansas game when Arthur Kaluma looked like the best player on the court. And he's got a lot of versatility. He can play small ball 5 if you want him to. He's probably naturally a 4 or 3 even. But he made a big jump, at the very end of the year. And if he continues on that trajectory, Creighton will very, will fare very well and probably deserve to be in the top 5 or top 10. So I think Arthur Kaluma is the X factor for this team. Obviously, there's some other guys around him who are talented and have been injured the past year who they need those guys back too. But if you're asking opposing coaches, who's the guy on that team, I think Arthur Kaluma is the name that you're going to hear the most often.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Certainly one of my favorites to track through the season last year. And while there is a ton to like about this roster, we're also seeing something kind of unique, at least in this point in time, and that is that we've got an absolute arms race in the Big East, right? So St. John's, Providence are really loading up on some new talent, and you've obviously got the traditional powers there. So what are your thoughts on how Creighton handles the new environment of this Big East?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because it's kind of a league with Jay Wright's retirement. I think it's a little bit to be determined who emerges as the new alpha dog, and maybe it's the old alpha dog, and it's Villanova. But I think there's a little bit of a question about what the league looks like at the top over the next few years, and nobody would have imagined 5 years ago that Creighton might step into that role. But Greg McDermott has done a really nice job loading up on talent, and he usually develops players as well as about anybody in the league. So I think there's a lot of questions at the top.
Oh, I think we might have lost him there for a second.
Looks like we might have lost Dirk there as he gets reconnected. Mike, you want to kind of finish out that thought and maybe give us a bit more of a picture on this revamped Big East?
Yeah, I think he's right. I mean, who's going to kind of either take over that Jay Wright role, in the head coaching department here in the Big East, and who's going to kind of step over Villanova here if anyone's going to. I really like Creighton here, St. John's, as we get Dirk back in. Just talking about, who's that next coach that you think, do you think Greg McDermott, can be that next Jay Wright type of, person to replace the Big East, top dogs here?
Well, it's interesting. There was some chatter, in the past year that Greg McDermott, might be looking around. He's been a hot name with certain jobs. Ohio State probably most prominent a couple years ago. He was in the rumor mill at Arizona State here this last 6 months, and there was a sense that maybe Greg McDermott, was looking for one last job. I think it's going to be hard to leave, if he's got guys like Kaluma and Alexander coming in. And they might not be here very long, but it's a pretty good indication of the talent pipeline that he's established at Creighton. So I'm not saying he's going to be the guy, but from a pure talent standpoint, I think Creighton right now can rank with about anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that we love on this show, we love to talk about metrics, right? So you kind of hit it on the head earlier with Creighton being a defensive stalwart last year, 19th in the nation in defensive efficiency. But we did see some offensive struggles, ranking in the 300s in three-point shooting, turnover percentage. So do you think we see an adjustment in style of play, especially with Shireman coming over? Do you think there's guys like Francisco Farabello, who's coming over from TCU, as a shooter? Mason Miller, redshirted last year, can shoot from the outside. Do you think they're going to be counted on a little bit more? Do you think the style is going to, really reflect kind of what we saw last year?
Well, you guys are wise to point out the metrics because they changed dramatically this past year. And Creighton, if you watched them in the Big East tournament, for instance, they played some ugly basketball against Villanova. They looked really good against Providence. They looked bad against Villanova, and they did turn the ball over too much. So I think the solution, the silver bullet here, is to try to find a way to sort of blend the old let it fly, offensive perfection with the new defensive grit. And I think Shireman will help in that regard quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely a bit of an interesting piece in terms of how he fits in and how he potentially influences the style of play going forward. So we'll be watching that closely. Maybe zooming out a little bit here, Dirk. Curious, obviously, the transfer portal, the advent of NIL. It's an entirely new landscape in college basketball. So would love to hear from you. How is NIL impacting this program? Are there any $800,000 contracts being handed out in Omaha, or what does that market look like for the Creighton players?
Well, Omaha is a basketball town. It's a football state, but it's a basketball town. And I think, a lot of the NIL, the NIL collectives are emerging here as they are in various other places. We'll see if the NCAA tries to put a kibosh on that or not. Creighton's a private school with a pretty wealthy donor base. I think they'll be able to keep up with the Joneses if necessary. Maybe not to the degree that Kansas or Duke or Kentucky will, but I think Creighton will be fairly well positioned in that regard to go after players if necessary. It's I think the Big East is in a little bit of a bind when it comes to resources, just because they're not going to have that football revenue coming in that the Big Ten and the SEC have. So that's something to keep an eye on. But I think Creighton is going to be in a better position than most Big East schools.
Absolutely. So final thing here, it's early May. We want to know, though, is this the year of the Blue Jay? And do we start buying our gear now, or do we wait a little bit and play wait and see approach? What are your thoughts?
Well, Creighton's had a lot of bad luck in the second half of seasons over the last 10 years. So I think you can buy those T-shirts, but do it with a little bit of reluctance, or maybe hedge your bets, because sometimes things fall apart for this program in February and March.
Fair enough. Will certainly be a fun ride between now and then. Once again, Dirk Chatelain, thank you very much for spending some time with us. For anyone out there that is tuned in, definitely get over there to Twitter at Dirk Chatelain, or read all of his great work at omaha.com. No one that I have come across is as plugged into this program. So definitely appreciate you spending some time with us and from filling us in on everything that's going on with the Jays.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, Dirk.
Thanks, Dirk. So, Mike, we mentioned off the top that Shireman himself, I believe, was number 2 on your big board. And now that we've got a few more days under our belt in this transfer portal window, we've got several other top 10 players that are making their decision. Why don't you kick us off with your number 7 player?
Yeah, so we saw our guy KJ Williams from Murray State, LSU, right? Big surprise. Head coach Matt McCann moved over to LSU. Obviously brought along Justice Hill, who was our number 44 ranked player, and Trey Hannibal with him. Yeah, this is starting to look like a pretty good team after the loss of Will Wade here, and the entire team seemed to go into the transfer portal. Now we're seeing LSU bring in the Murray State talent, who obviously was a really stout team last year, and now you bring over the Ohio Valley Player of the Year in KJ Williams. For me, KJ is that guy where we talk about the mid-majors, right, and they're kind of littered all over the top of our board, right? The question is, how do these guys transition when they get into SEC and they get into the Big East, when they get into the Big 12? With the style of play, KJ Williams' body type, I feel like he's a little more equipped with his inside-outside game to kind of look past those struggles and kind of work through those as he gets into the conference play. So obviously this is a huge get. Anytime you land someone inside the top 10, especially in these days with the transfer portal and how many really good players are in this thing nowadays. So I think for me, obviously, we're going to be, for a DFS perspective, we're going to be playing a lot of him. He kind of slots right into that role. Darius Days, that Tari Eason type role. He's going to play that traditional role where he's going to get touches inside, he's going to get touches outside. And, I expect to see him put up, gaudy numbers and challenge for a double-double on a nightly basis. And I'm just really looking forward to seeing him play on the big stage here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch, right? Not surprising to see Williams and a bunch of other Murray State talent make their way to the Bayou and suit up for these Tigers. I mean, on the whole, this is a team in transition, right? You mentioned new coach. Essentially, all of their existing players jumped in the portal. They lost the vast majority of them. They've got a few people returning, so there's going to be a lot of question marks around who this team is. I guess from a DFS perspective, and I want you to check me on this logic, it would seem to me like the guys that came in from Murray State are the ones that are going to have the shortest learning curve adapting to this LSU game, right? Is that kind of how you're thinking about it? Are they going to be the priorities for this LSU team in the early parts of next season?
Yeah, you have to think so, right? I mean, McMahon, he's going to obviously put the ball on the players that he trusts, right? And he's had seasons with Hill, Hannibal, and obviously KJ Williams. And, they've taken him to the tournament, so he trusts those guys, right? So I think you're going to see him lean on these guys early and often. And, they're no slouches either. So, obviously being a top 10 player in the portal, KJ Williams, should be that guy that they go to early and often. And I'm just really excited to see him play in the SEC. So I think from a DFS perspective, all three of these guys are going to be guys that we're going to be using a lot. I think from a macro perspective, it makes LSU worthy of, middle of the pack with the potential to, maybe get towards the top, depending on how this team blends, how else this roster comes together. So just kind of exciting times after, after the loss of Will Wade and seeing them, turn this roster over.
Yeah, definitely a program in transition and a program to watch. Another transition is a high upside guard heading out west to play for the Fightin' Phil Knights. Oregon Ducks. Why don't you tell us about their latest addition?
Yeah, so our guy Jermaine Cuisinart, 35th ranked transfer in our top 100 board on drroto.com, taking his talents out to Oregon, playing for the Ducks here. So, man, we watched him play last year at South Carolina. Frank Martin had the most ridiculous system. Felt like he's pretty much just plugging and playing everybody 18 minutes. So, when we saw him have some monster games against LSU, I think he dropped 33 points against them, had some other big games. When he got 30 to 35 minutes, he was a super productive player. Dana Altman, with the loss of Jacob Young, Davion Harmon, they lost Will Richardson, Dana Altman likes to play with guards. So he's going to pair up here with Colorado transfer Keyshawn Barthelemy, who is a nice guard out there for Colorado and, bring some experience in the Pac-12. So, these two guys together kind of give him two of the three pieces that he's kind of looking forward to make his three-guard backcourt work here. And, they could be kind of sneaky in the Pac-12. We haven't talked much about the Pac-12, right? It's been pretty heavy with the Big East, obviously diving into the SEC, and some of these other, big boy conferences here. But, the Pac-12 seems like every year they're kind of overlooked. But, Oregon landing these two guards, definitely going to put them in the mix. And we'll just kind of see what happens as the rest of the roster comes together. So what are your thoughts on the addition here? And, what are your thoughts on Oregon in the Pac-12?
Yeah, it's a good shout. It feels like we fall right into that kind of East Coast media bias, even though we're not on the East Coast. We definitely don't talk about these West Coast teams quite as much. It probably has to do with what slates these teams are on and where the cards. I had anything along those lines. How much money is Phil not spending on NIL right now? Is there anything reported out there, or is he just sticking to paying for all the facilities and letting somebody else cut the check?
No, I think he's making those offers out there, right? So, Oregon's making a splash. Obviously, when we look at college football, there's been some rumors out there. Definitely not on my list, as you see the burnt orange and white back here trying to take our best receiver. But yeah, I think obviously having Nike backing, we talk about NIL, it's going to be huge here in the next few years. So we'll kind of see how they play with that. And, if they're able to turn some of these big time transfers and big time high school prospects, over to the West Coast. So that's something to obviously pay attention to. I think when you're looking at next year, obviously bringing in the two guards here, some of the roster back, Quincy Guerrier's coming back here, a really nice forward that transferred over from Syracuse the year before and didn't quite find his footing, but I'm expecting bigger things from him. So nice little core roster that they're building here in Oregon, and definitely excited to see, how the rest of it turns out.
For sure. And, moving on, one of our pillars, our core principles here at the One and Done Show is that we seek feedback and we immediately activate on it. And so with that, let's actually keep talking about these West Coast teams, these Pac-12 teams. We've got another team that disappointed a little bit, but has quietly been stacking up some pretty nice pieces in the Arizona State Sun Devils. Why don't you tell us about all of the moves that they've made this offseason?
Yeah, so Arizona State, 14-17 last year, 10-10 in the Pac-12. Disappointing, right? The year before, a little bit disappointing. Obviously, you have Remy Martin transfer out of there last year, goes to Kansas, wins the national championship. So it's really a punch in the gut, right? But, Yeah, man, one of the most underrated off seasons going on right now. I mean, you get the transfer from both brothers here, the Cambridge brothers. You get Nevada guard here, Desmond Cambridge, who is number 36 on our transfer portal board. A really, really good scorer. And you get his brother, who was kind of buried at Auburn behind the two bigs, and Kessler and Jabari Smith. Only averaged 5 points a game, more of a role player there, but you expect him to get some more opportunity here. And if he gets 25 to 30 minutes, he could be someone that really breaks out. Definitely got a lot of upside there. So I like the way the roster's coming together here. They also snagged Desmond Cambridge's teammate Warren Washington from Nevada. Really good shot blocker. Averaged almost 11 points a game last year. He's a good screen and roll big. Got a little bit of versatility to him. Doesn't really have that outside game, but definitely someone that can eat up space, clog the paint, grab some boards, and set picks for Desmond Cambridge. And our guy coming back here, DJ Horn, who we played a lot of in DFS last year, really kind of broke out. 12 and a half points a game. Really showed some explosiveness, getting to the bucket, shooting from the outside. So, man, you start to look at this roster and you're like, man, if the pieces start to fit and you're able to make this thing work, it's pretty exciting. And then we just got news yesterday that Frankie Collins, Michigan transfer, coming on over to play here. So we'll see what kind of role he's going to play, whether he's going to come off the bench, whether they decide to go, with more of a maybe a 3-guard rotation in the starting lineup. But we saw Frankie Collins in the tournament when Devontae Jones was out against Colorado State. A really nice game. And then, obviously Jones came back and kind of took over that point guard duties from there. So obviously Collins looking for some greener grass here. And, I think he's definitely an exciting addition. These aren't quite top 100 players. When you start getting to the 100s, I mean, really, 100 through 150, 200 are going to be a little interchangeable. And, that's kind of where I see Washington, Collins, even a Devin Cambridge. So just kind of a nice offseason so far. Any thoughts on Arizona State?
Yeah, a few. On a lighter note, I love seeing the Cambridge brothers suiting up for this team. It feels like now that there's, we're in this age of player movement, we're seeing a lot more family affairs and brothers teaming up on teams. So
going home.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely a lot of fun to watch just from a storyline standpoint. Specifically for the outlook for the Sun Devils. I mean, in the example you were giving, really lies the key here, right? Like they've added a ton of really solid players, a bit more of the volume play, but that depth is critical, right? We talk about their loss in Remy Martin, right? If one of these guys becomes that type of first man off the bench producer, they're in a really good position, right? If they, eventually battle with injury, which seems to be the case as we get closer into March, they've got guys that have the pedigree and that are, big time recruits and have some good college minutes under their belt to contribute, if and when injury strikes this team. So, it's going to be a bit of a question mark as we head into the season. In terms of, how the rotation, shakes out and who's going to get, ball handling responsibility and who's going to get more run and more minutes. But ultimately, there are a lot of guys that can really contribute. I guess to that last thought, if you had to throw a dart at kind of who's got the inside track to really step up out of these, out of these most recent additions, who do you see playing a bigger role earlier in the season?
Yeah, I think Desmond Cambridge is going to be critical to how their season's going to go. He's going to give them that lead scorer, someone that can create. I really love his game. He's one of my favorite players. I probably have him rated higher than a lot of other places have him. Just having watched him, definitely a lethal scorer here. So I'm interested to see, how they're going to use him. I think the X factor, though, is going to be what's going to happen with Marcus Bagley. A top 25 type recruit, just battled injuries the last couple of years. When he was healthy, man, he was, doing some nice things early in his career. So, the expectation is that he's coming back. If he's healthy, they could be pretty dangerous. If he's anywhere near the level of player that, he's capable of being, man, they're going to be an exciting team if they can put all the pieces together and get these guys going and really work out these rotations. And we're going to see them kind of rise to the top if they can stay healthy and make it all fit. So definitely exciting times for them, and I continue to look forward to what they're how they're going to finish out this roster here.
Yeah, that is certainly for sure the case. As we wrap up here, Mike, a few more news and notes items. We have another player from your big board that has decided where they are going, another one with decisions to come. So let's fill everyone in on those latest pieces of news and maybe a little bit about what you're looking to learn as we head into the weekend.
Yeah, so Wright State forward, Grant Basile picked Virginia Tech. He's number 77 on our board. Man, super skilled offensive big man, averaged 18 points, 9 rebounds, played with Tanner Holden on that really fun Wright State team that a lot of people saw in that play-in game. So definitely going to help ease the blow. Kive Luma, someone that we played a lot in DFS, and Justin Mutz is obviously still deciding if he's going pro or if he's coming back. So both of those guys were monster front court players. We saw them take down Duke in the ACC tournament title game. So, 2 big losses if both those guys head off to the NBA. But, bringing in a guy of this caliber that can play on the block, definitely going to help soften the blow here. And then our 25th ranked player, Antoine Davis, absolute bucket getter. Averaged almost 24 points per game last year. Interesting finalist, right? He's got Maryland, Kansas State, Georgetown, BYU, and Detroit. So, I'm looking at Kansas State. And it would be super exciting to see him play for Patrick Ewing. I think that Georgetown offense, we know that pace would be super nice. But, if I had to pick a favorite right now, it's looking like Kansas State. I think we're going to get that decision on Monday. And there's going to be plenty of decisions happening, with over 1,400 guys in the portal. There's going to be more and more decisions being made. We're going to see a lot of those starting tomorrow. We're going to see a lot on Monday. So these rosters are really starting to round and take form. So any thoughts as we kind of head into the weekend?
I mean, really, my closing thoughts, there are several players that have announced they will be making their decision and announcing their decision over the next couple of days. So this news is going to continue to come at us fast and furious. If you are wanting to stay on top of all of it, got a couple pieces of homework for you. First, if you're not already doing so, get over to Twitter at MCHolland34. Hit that follow button. If you're feeling spicy, hit that notification button. Mike is keeping track of every little crumb of news that's going around out there. And then head over to drroto.com, get yourself signed up, get into our members-only Discord, and you will see not only that breaking news that Mike is tracking, but also his thoughts and his compilation of how these players fall into the ranks of the free agents. And the last thing to do before we get out of here is let's get this bread.
Thanks for stopping by the office. Get your fantasy prescription by subscribing to the channel and checking out drroto.com. And until the next visit, be well and take care.